So today's lecture is going to be pretty much on spelling correction, um, and we'll be done with chapter 3 once we are finished with spelling correction. So recall that spelling correction has two principal uses. One is to correct the documents that are being indexed. If the documents contain spelling errors, we may want to correct those spellings so that with the corrected spellings, those documents can be queried accurately. Right? If the query is say peacock and the document contains the word peacock but spelled incorrectly, then that document won't be returned. But if we do spelling correction on the document, then uh, that document will be returned. So that's one of the reasons why you may want to um correct spellings in your documents. The other use of spelling correction is to correct spelling errors in the queries. And why do we want to correct spelling errors in the queries? Because users may accidentally type the wrong spelling, and if we are able to correct the spelling of the query, then we can actually go and retrieve the documents that the user is really looking for. We can retrieve the right answers. So these are the two main uses of spelling correction, and there are two main methods, two broad methods for spelling correction. The first method is isolated word spelling correction, where we correct each word that is spelled incorrectly without looking at the context in which that word appears. So we just treat each word as an isolated unit, check if its spelling is correct or not. If it's not, we just correct the spelling. The problem with this method is that it's not going to catch spelling errors where the incorrect spelling itself is a valid word in the dictionary. Right? So for example, if there's a sentence saying an asteroid fell from the sky, and instead of from, the user types form, F-O-R-M, accidentally, instead of typing R first and O later on, the order may get interchanged if you're typing pretty fast. So that would become an asteroid fell from the sky, and in isolated word spelling correction, you would not detect any spelling errors in the resulting sentence. In context sensitive spelling correction, on the other hand, we not only look at spelling errors within words, we also look at the surrounding words to see if the context matches or not. So it's possible for the context to not match even for words that are spelled correctly. For example, I flew from Heathrow to Narita. Okay, so here the word form is a valid word in the dictionary, but if you look at the context, this sentence doesn't make much sense. So we may want to correct this word from form to from, and that's what context sensitive spelling correction would do. If you work with Microsoft Office version 2007 onwards, it has context sensitive spelling correction. So that this is more sophisticated than just isolated word spelling correction. Now we are going to look at each of these four in some detail. We're going to look at I'm going to first discuss the two principal uses, and then I'm going to discuss the two main methods in more detail. Okay, so just to recall the flow, this is what we'll be discussing first. This is number 2, this is number 3, and this is number 4 in future slides. Okay, so let's look at number 1, correcting documents that are going to be indexed. Now, in the context of information retrieval, document correction is primarily done for documents that are scanned optically. Okay, so if you have a physical book that is scanned, you may want to convert the characters in that book into text. And in this case, it's possible for errors to creep in the process of transforming that scanned document into text. So your spelling correction algorithms, if they are going to be used to correct the documents, need to keep in mind which errors are more likely in this process of transformation of scanned documents to text. For example, if the letters R and N appear adjacent to one another in the scanned document, and if the quality of the scanning is not good, then it's possible that in the process of converting that document into text, these two characters may get wrongly identified as the letter M. Likewise, the character O may get confused with the character D. So a spelling corrector for OCR documents needs to use this domain specific knowledge, this knowledge about what errors are more likely and what errors are less likely. It needs to incorporate that knowledge when trying to correct spelling errors. Now that's different from correcting a document that is directly typed by the user. For example, if it's a Word document, then the domain knowledge is going to be different. Right? If you're developing a spelling corrector to correct your Word document, it will need to take into account which errors are more likely while you're typing on the keyboard. So if you're typing on the QWERTY keyboard, uh, the letter O appears right next to the letter I. So you're more likely to mistype O as I on the keyboard than to mistype O as D. So you can see that the domain knowledge is going to determine how exactly you build your spelling corrector. Now document correction is usually done for OCR documents, even though in principle one can do document correction for documents that are on the web, because those can have spelling errors, and in fact even printed material like books and newspapers have spelling errors. What the policy is in information retrieval systems is to not interfere with the documents that somebody has actually created. Spelling correction is used for OCR documents, but it's not used for other kinds of documents in the context of information retrieval. That's the policy decision. One advantage of doing spelling correction is that your vocabulary size is going to have is going to be smaller, right? Because if misspellings are corrected, then the terms that you will have at the end of the linguistic pre-processing phase will be smaller, and so the size of your dictionary will be smaller. But as I said, what we'll be doing in the context of web documents is mainly doing number 2, which is correcting the queries of the user instead of correcting the documents. Step 1 will be followed only for OCR documents. Okay, so let's focus on number 2 here. The second use of spelling correction, which is to correct user queries. So let's consider a query like Alanis Morissette. She's a celebrity, and her correct spelling is, I believe, Morissette. Now we can just try this query on Google, and one of the things that you have to decide beforehand when you want to build a spelling corrector is what kind of UI you want to present to the user for spelling correction. Okay, so let's see what sort of UI Google presents. If we just type this misspelling, Alanis Morissette, Morise. Now you can see that what Google is doing is it's correcting the spelling to Alanis Morissette, which this is her true spelling, and it's showing the results for the correct spelling. It's not retrieving documents corresponding to the actual query. It's retrieving documents corresponding to the corrected query. And it's also giving you an option. If you truly wanted to search for the misspelling, you could actually do that. Okay, I could click on this, and then I'm going to get documents having the misspelling in it. Okay, so notice also that the number of documents containing the misspelling is just about 90,000 or so, whereas the number of documents containing the actual spelling is more than 18 million. So this is something you have to decide. What sort of interface do you want to present um, to the user? Okay, do you want to retrieve the documents that are indexed by the correct spelling after doing spelling correction yourself? Or do you not want to return any documents but just suggest alternative queries, allow the user to choose which of those alternatives the user actually meant, and then get the appropriate documents? For example, if you go to Wikipedia, okay, let's say I want to search for Charles Dickens. Okay, so this is the correct spelling. Now let's enter an incorrect spelling. Let's say I miss out the E at the end. Now you can see that what Wikipedia is doing is it's presenting this phrase, did you mean Charles Dickens? It's doing spelling correction. It's finding out that Charles Dickens is what you probably meant, but it's not returning any results. It's allowing you to make a decision here. Is this what you meant? And if I say yes, then it's going to get me the actual page. Whereas what we saw in Google was that it's giving you that choice. It's asking you whether you meant Alan S. Morissette with the correct spelling, but it also retrieved the documents for you with the correct spelling. Right? So you can see that there are multiple variations possible over here. That's something you have to decide beforehand, because your algorithms are going to depend on that. Okay, so let's look at number 3 here. So we've looked at the two principal uses of spelling correction. Let's now focus on correcting user queries. This is what we're going to focus on. And let's look at the first method for spelling correction, which is isolated word spelling correction. So isolated word correction. The fundamental premise, there are actually two premises that are made in isolated word correction. The first premise is that there is a standard dictionary or a standard lexicon from which the correct spellings come. Okay. So this is the reference set of correct spellings against which you will match a particular word and see if the word corresponds to a correct spelling or not. And this dictionary could actually correspond to a standard English dictionary like Oxford's or Webster's and so on, or it could correspond to a domain specific or industry specific dictionary containing all kinds of technical terms also. This is especially true if you're building a search engine for a particular domain, health related or chemistry related or shopping related and so on. So you could have a specific dictionary for that domain which is hand maintained, and that could serve as your reference dictionary. Another alternative is to just treat all the words in the documents of your corpus as making up the reference dictionary. Okay, so all the names, all the acronyms, all the terms that you are left with when you parse your corpus, they all will determine what the reference dictionary is. And of course, if there are misspellings in those documents, then those misspellings will also enter into this lexicon. But one of the things that you'll also do is you'll keep track of how many times a particular word appears in the corpus as a whole. Right? That was called the collection frequency, if you remember from chapter 2. That's how you detect stop words, for example, because stop words are the words which have the highest correction frequencies since they appear in almost every document. Now misspellings, as you just saw in the case of that example Alan S. Morris said, misspellings will appear relatively rarely compared to correct spellings. So even though you could treat the entire set of terms appearing in the corpus as your lexicon, it's not that you'll be giving equal weight to every term. Okay, you'll give more weight to a term whose collection frequency is higher. So this is the first premise. There is a dictionary against which you will match a term in order to fix it. The second premise is that there is a way to calculate the distance between any two words. Okay. So there is a way to calculate the distance between two words, any two words. That's the second premise. And what we will do is, when we are given a query term, we will look up this lexicon and determine which are the words in the lexicon that are closest to the query term. And the way we will measure the closeness is by calculating this distance between the query term and the various words in the dictionary or the lexicon. Now there are multiple ways to define this distance measure between two words, and we'll look at three of them. The first one is called the Erid distance or the Levenshtein distance. The second one is just a variant of the first one, and the third one is a different kind of distance measure, which we'll see after we've seen how to calculate the Erid distance. So again, going back to the flow, we are looking at isolated word correction. We are saying that there is a standard lexicon which contains all the words with the right spellings, and we are trying to measure which of those words is closest to our given query term.